Like my personal hero, the Lindbergh baby!
Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Cameron Regal.
And on this episode of the Kongversation, we are finally going to be discussing Yooka-Laylee and the Kracklestone by DM Combo, Dream Prism Press, and Platonic Games. Now, this has been out for a while now. It's been almost 2 years. I can't keep track of time given what happened, the pandemic and just the whole kind of time standing still sort of aspect to it all. But I feel like it's been out for a while. It was definitely maybe a little bit after Impossible Lair came out. The physical version came after the digital. I can't keep track. But we haven't discussed it yet.
Yeah, I don't know how long it's been, but it's been a substantial enough time to call it a while.
Yeah, I was like, well, I want to give people time to read it before we just dive into spoilers. And then, as these things often do, it just gets away from you. It's then, well, now it's just not very topical, and we need to circle back to it at some point. Had the same problem with, Chris Alcock's Sea of Thieves novel, Athena's Fortune. I mean, this is just the way things happen on the Kongversation. It's my poor management style.
Yeah, we have to delay certain things to give like a catch-up window for those who are actually interested in those things. The problem is new stuff does not stop coming in the interim.
Yeah, it's funny. You pointed this out the other day to, I think, the Inner Circle. For more on that, visit dkvine.com/Patreon. But you said, isn't it funny that ostensibly a Donkey Kong podcast just has too much stuff to talk about that we can't fit it all in? And people look at the episodes we produce, how long we've been going, and they don't understand. They don't understand how the Kongversation keeps finding things to talk about. And granted, look, if we didn't have new stuff, new product, stuff in the expanded shared universe to talk about, we would still find things to talk about. That's the way I operate.
And we have a very good problem.
Yeah. So, finally I had an opening though, because Platonic, Dream Prism, and Limited Run Games. Limited Run has done lots with Platonic. They did the physical Switch edition of Yooka-Laylee. They're offering, in addition to the Game Decks Yooka-Laylee card game, which is bizarrely canon, and it's considered a complete Yooka-Laylee adventure by Platonic. So we will talk about that later on. But in addition to that, they're also offering a special edition of Yooka-Laylee and the Kracklestone called the Grand Tome Edition. It's got a new cover, but it looks like the Grand Tome that Yooka-Laylee jump into and spend the majority of this graphic novel in. So that's now available at Limited Run, but it's limited to 1,000 copies max. After that, gone forever. So it's like, well, now this is a good opportunity to bring back Kracklestone into the Kongversation. Because, we had DM Combo on the Kongversation back during the Kickstarter campaign. And I've wanted to come back to it, do a proper literary analysis on it, and now is the time. So we will be getting into spoilers a little bit on this episode. So if you have not read it and you want to remain unspoiled, I would recommend tuning out. But if you've read it, if it's been a while but you enjoy it, stay with us. And before you tune out, if you don't want to be spoiled, I just do want to plug, the limited run edition of Yooka-Laylee and the Kracklestone. You can find that at limitedrungames.com. I'm not going to get into my final thoughts at the top of the episode, but I would say it would be worth it. And I would say that anybody who's interested in what the Kongversation routinely talks about, if you are a fan of Platonic, but if you're also a fan of the era of games that DK Vine and the Kongversation frequently go back to, which is the mid to late 90s N64 era. There is a lot you will like in this graphic novel. So even if you've never really been sold on the characters of Yooka and Laylee, one, you will be after this, and two, it's the closest thing I've seen to one of those 3D adventures, but in comic book form. So check it out. But if you don't care about spoilers, welcome aboard to the episode. And I want to talk really quick about cartoons, Cameron, because, you know, I do this for a living. This is my career. And being at one of the head tables of this great community, I realize I'm also one of the oldest people in it. Having been around since the original Donkey Kong Country. And, a lot of people are shocked by how old I am when they start talking about things like Shrek. And, Heil, what do you mean you haven't seen Shrek? Heil, what do you mean you haven't seen Shrek 2? Heil, what do you mean you haven't seen... Is Shrek the third? Is that the third one? Or is it Shrek the fourth? That's the fourth one.
It's Shrek the third, because it's about royal succession.
Oh, that's almost as confusing as using Roman numerals for your third one when you just regular numbers for the second one. That's nonsense, Cameron.
Yeah, the fourth one is technically Shrek Forever After, but nobody calls it that. Or Shrek the Final Chapter, or just any number of other things that aren't Shrek 4.
It still makes more sense than the Fast and the Furious franchise, where I somehow know all of those in order despite never seeing any of them. So I guess it works. I guess it lodges into your head, but it's like the fourth one is Fast and Furious, and then it's Fast 5, and then is it Fast and Furious 6, and then Furious 7, and then Fate of the Furious. It's okay. But yeah, then you've got SpongeBob memes, and they're like, hey, Heil, SpongeBob meme. And I'm like, I didn't watch SpongeBob. I'm old.
We've established your media reference cutoff is somewhere around late 1999, 2000.
Late 1999, maybe a little bit before that, is when I tuned out of Nickelodeon. So, early 1990s Nickelodeon was basically my audiovisual hangout as a kid, right? I was the only child, I had plenty of friends, I guess, but when I was just home by myself and it was, a weekend afternoon, I would have my own TV, where all my Nintendo consoles were hooked up, and I would often have, by often, I mean always have Nickelodeon on, because early 90s Nickelodeon in particular, it was something that spoke to me as a kid, because I didn't like a lot of kids' media as a kid. I always felt like it was talking down to me, or it was somehow beneath me. I don't know. I remember rolling my eyes whenever they would read Dr. Seuss in grade school, because I'm like, they're just trying to pander to me.
I think that's a universal experience among kids. No kid wants to feel like they're being talked down to.
Yeah, I think you hit a certain point of childhood and you're like, no, I'm past this. And also, it's about finding your own voice and finding your own likes that aren't what your parents or caretakers are pushing on you. And the great thing about Nickelodeon was that it was kids programming that seemed to understand kids, at least back then. Like I said, I can't speak to it at a certain point, but it was weirdly empowering to be a kid and watch Nickelodeon. And, certain cartoons on Nickelodeon had that attitude and philosophy about them. And, I'm specifically thinking about when they launched Nicktoons. Those original 4 Nicktoons, which, I guess Ren and Stimpy is a bit of a problematic topic these days, but I'm specifically thinking Ren and Stimpy, how much of a revelation that felt like at the time. And it definitely didn't talk down to kids. A lot of people in the media, associate it with gross out humor and stuff. But really, it was, in my opinion, reframing the childhood experience and kind of putting that in the context of adulthood. Ren and Stimpy were these two weirdos who lived together and would go on crazy adventures, but there's no real semblance of adulthood. It was kind of like a child-like view of adulthood, right? And I eventually became a much bigger fan, because it was more rooted in my sensibilities, of a show that came a little bit later called Rocko's Modern Life. And I know, like, there's connection between Rocko and SpongeBob, but I didn't stick around Nickelodeon for SpongeBob, unfortunately.
It's funny you phrase this as, like, you kind of encountering this world of Nickelodeon and saying, like, oh, this is a different kind of kids network. This is, like, this doesn't feel like the kids media. Whereas I'm older than quite a few DK Viners, but still a bit younger than you. And to me, this Nickelodeon just was like the quintessential, like, this is the kids media.
There was a point where Nickelodeon just became kids media, but in the early 90s, it was like the Disney Channel, and it was,
right.
You still very much had that Walt Disney influence. And I didn't become a Disney fan until they like bought Marvel and Star Wars.
I am honestly kind of shocked, like I say that not to diminish like the role quite the contrary. I mean, Nickelodeon's identity was so strong that it just became like the quintessential, this is what kids television is.
Yeah.
I had, aside from reruns, when in that like period where like Toon Disney was rerunning a bunch of like syndicated stuff from their Saturday mornings that had gone off the air, like Darkwing and Gargoyles, like Disney was just so irrelevant to me that it's only very relatively recently with stuff like Gravity Falls, the DuckTales revival, and the Owl House, where I've suddenly found myself shocked that like Disney is kind of the animation channel I'm most into right now, which is very, very odd, because they were just sort of I don't know, they kind of came off to me as like the squeaky clean, like, this is what the family wants you to watch channel, and therefore Nickelodeon was the more interesting option.
Right. Nickelodeon felt like pirate radio for kids, and kids media evolved as time went on, and, Cartoon Network grew in prominence and stuff. But for me, like, it was all about Nickelodeon in the early to mid 1990s. But as I got older, I kind of gravitated away from Nickelodeon. Like, the programming started to veer away from my taste as they were evolving. I think like the majority of the stuff I watched on Nickelodeon near the end was actually just like the live action stuff, like The Adventures of Pete and Pete, which I maintain is not only one of the best kid shows ever made, but also just one of the finest television programs ever made. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. But one of the things I graduated to was The Simpsons. The golden era of The Simpsons. And again, this might be surprising to people because I rarely talk about The Simpsons. I don't like people doing funny cartoon impressions of Homer Simpson. Whatever people like to do, Ned Flanders, I don't know.
You haven't devolved into half your conversation skills being based on quotes from The Simpsons, like my brand of brain poison.
Yeah. But seasons 3 through roughly 8, I love The Simpsons and that felt like the natural jumping off point for me from that era of Nickelodeon. Cause The Simpsons was definitely didn't talk down to you. It was programming for adults, but it was filled with the same esoteric references, and I felt like I had to keep up with it, and I had to, like, it was kind of a pop culture education unto itself with all of the jokes it made. And once I discovered The Simpsons, that was kind of my brand of humor and entertainment for a while, until it kind of hit that drop-off point where I feel like The Simpsons got too full of itself. What's the connection, you might be saying? Well, I'm just kind of laying the groundwork here. I remember when I really started getting fed up with The Simpsons, and I mean, there were still quality episodes throughout, but up until, like season 9 or 10 or whatever, you'd have one-offs that were like, oh, that was pretty good, but...
Yeah, there's not really like a universal, like, point with The Simpsons where everybody agrees, oh, absolutely everything after this episode you can just skip. There's generally like everybody has their own drop-off point, and it's usually like one particular episode went too far for them.
Yes, for me it was the jockeys, the magical jockey kingdom. I was like, I'm done with this. But and I've held true to that by and large. Like I haven't seen an episode of The Simpsons in years. Even the classic stuff is kind of tainted for me.
Even me, it's like I can catch a new episode of the show and enjoy it and think that was pretty good, but I did reach a drop-off point where I decided, like, I'm not obsessively keeping up with this every Sunday like I used to.
Yeah, I remember one specific character that really marked a turning point for me, and that was the introduction of Comic Book Guy. Comic Book Guy felt like this is when the show started punching down a little bit. And, Comic Book Guy was your stereotypical comic book nerd who complained about all sorts of minutia that didn't really matter. And isn't he pathetic?
He's a mouthpiece for, like, every, like, ugly, annoying nerd thing, basically. Like,
which there are ugly, annoying nerds. I'm not dismissing that, but it felt like the Simpsons writers starting to get a little bit mean-spirited at, like, the criticism of their own show and their own writing and their own, like, lack of attention to detail.
I will say, like, Comic Book Guy wasn't, like, a late season addition to the show. He was around very early on, but I do think, along the lines of what you're saying, they started increasingly using him for more meta commentary as the show went on.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the jockey episode you're talking about just kind of has him, like, winking at the camera a bunch of times, like, hey, didn't we already do this exact plot? Like, wasn't it funnier the first time? That sort of thing.
I don't know. Like, I feel like The Simpsons, as geeky as the writing staff could be, they were all still a bunch of Harvard graduates with trust funds who were kind of always felt like they were above it all a little bit. And this was before nerd culture sort of took over Hollywood and took over mainstream media and became the status quo.
I will say that, like, from my perspective at watching The Simpsons, like, I got into The Simpsons, like, it was kind of a weird, like, bookend for me. Like, I was into them as a kid who was way too young to be watching before we got cable TV. Then I dovetailed out of it and got really way back into the show around the time people say it started to go downhill, but by that point I had reruns. But from my perspective, I remember distinctly, like, I think Comic Book Guy is a very funny character. I think The Simpsons in general has a lot of, like, very funny, like, dork characters. Comic Book Guy, Martin, Database. But I think seeing in hindsight, like, very nerdy writers of The Simpsons making those jokes about, like, people who were geeky and nerdy kind of made me, as a kid, like, so self-conscious, like, oh, I don't want to be like this person.
Exactly.
Therefore,
yes.
I'm going to disguise, like, my interest in any of these things.
You hit upon what I was getting to, Cameron, where Nickelodeon empowered me. Eventually, The Simpsons sort of ruined me because I did not want to be the comic book guy. And I obviously have always had a deep vested interest in things like shared universes. It blew my mind when I learned that Batman and Superman were in the same world. Like, what? And even things, non-consequential things relatively, like the ABC TGIF lineup on Friday nights, like between Family Matters and Full House, that all shared this same world, where, Urkel would show up from one show to the other, was just the coolest thing in the world to me. And I would like work out in my head, like, okay, if I was this huge Urkel fan, how would I consolidate that? If I ran like this Urkel fanzine, because this was before everybody was online. If I ran an Urkel fanzine, what would I cover in the Urkel fanzine? I was already thinking in these terms long before DK Vine, right? But I could never find that property that was uniquely mine, that I could geek out over, like I so badly wanted to geek out over, until Donkey Kong Country came along. And Donkey Kong Country changed everything for me, because everything about Donkey Kong Country seemed to be uniquely tailored for my taste. And so as soon as I hopped on the Donkey Kong Country train, like all my other interests sort of diminished a bit. But I always hid, outside of DK Vine, I always sort of hid my obsession with it, because I didn't want to be the comic book guy. And I'm bringing all of this up because Yooka-Laylee and the Kracklestone is this weird amalgamation of so much of my life in the 90s. It feels like it harkens back to Nickelodeon cartoons of the era, like Rocko's Modern Life. It is this unabashed celebration, this geeky celebration that of a shared universe, but specifically Yooka-Laylee itself, that doesn't get anything wrong. All of that like complaining comic book guy minutia, where I was like, oh, there is a continuity error on this page, and oh, that panel conflicts with what happens in World 4 of Yooka-Laylee. There's none of that. It is the most carefully crafted love letter I've potentially ever seen for a video game. And it's not afraid to be geeky. It almost invites you to be geeky with it. And it felt like such a huge validation of who I was in the 90s and who I tried to suppress being for so long, up until a few years ago. And I think it's great.
It's really amazing to me that the story, it, like Kracklestone at once does things that I wouldn't expect a Yooka-Laylee game to ever actually do, but not in a way that it ever feels apart from them. It just feels like this is it taking advantage of the medium in a comic book in a way that a game can't do.
Yes, but it feels like very much like Yooka-Laylee are having the type of adventure they would have in a game, but in presentation.
Oh,
in
100%. Like, I would say you could like reverse adapt this into a game and it would still hit every right note.
Yeah, but they like there's this one part in the book where they acknowledge that they're in a book, which is the kind of fourth wall breaking meta-ness that, Platonic and Rare have always engaged in with these types of games. Donkey Kong, Banjo-Kazooie, Conquer, they all know they're in a video game. Yooka-Laylee know they're in a video game, and in this case, they know they're in a book, but they're still having the same type of adventure they would have. It's not like things are fundamentally too different, but it definitely...
Plus, there's the odd recursion that they literally go into books.
Right.
In both of these.
Should they have gone into a grand video game in this one? I guess something to consider. But it's I figured I would like it, right? And talking with DM Cumbo, painted a good picture of what was in store. And me, especially these days, I give everything a chance. I don't like walk into anything with a negative mindset, but I don't think I was prepared for how much it impressed me and how much it made me feel good. It was like a warm hug for my soul. So much of this. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So I think we're just going to have to hit them point by point and try to suss it out, because it's honestly one of those things where I don't even know if I can adequately put it into words. You know, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then I am totally screwed trying to sum up this graphic novel. You might just have to experience it for yourself. But let's start with the art style itself, because that is the most immediately striking thing about this. That is going to be the thing you first notice, that first pulls you in. And, you know, it's something that I think even people who haven't read it are familiar with if they were exposed to our content about it, or if they're plugged into Playtonic on social media, or, you know, they more witnessed the Kickstarter campaign. But the art style is something that I don't really know how to describe. I've come up with a term for it that might be totally inaccurate, but it I think hits upon one of the reasons I like it. I call it comic art nouveau. And art nouveau was a style of art that was very prevalent from like the late 1800s, I want to say 1890 up through World War I. And then kind of Art Deco took over. But it's now, why am I explaining art to you, Cameron? You're the artist here. But you know, Art Nouveau is kind of like very smooth. It's not very angular. It's more of a celebration of nature and the natural world and the natural forms above all else. And when I was first exposed to it, and there's an art museum here in Richmond, Virginia, and they have a whole Art Nouveau wing. And I swear, like, it was just like, I've never been really like drawn into the art world, but I like had reactions to this art. It just like, it dialed into the same part of my brain that appreciates things like Donkey Kong Country. It is a celebration of nature, but in art. And it's something that I really got from a lot of DM Kumbo's work here, but it's done in a cartoony comic book style way that somehow effortlessly blends the two. And I might be totally off base, because I'm like, art criticism, art theory is not my thing, but I get the same warm fuzzies and the same emotional reaction from this as I do Art Nouveau. So tell me how wrong I am, Cameron.
I really think I get what you're going for here. Even if Art Nouveau wouldn't necessarily be the first thing I think of, I definitely see where you would hit on that, because I think a lot of what I love about this artwork is probably hitting on similar notes. Like a lot of Art Nouveau pieces are very concerned with like the sort of like framing device, or like architectural like space that they exist in. And I mean, the main thing I want to compliment, or one thing I want to compliment about this art, because I honestly can't pick one thing. This is just a gorgeous book.
Oh yeah.
The panel layouts, such that they are, there is a lot of, there are no true, like rectangular panels in this book. Everything is very natural looking. The panels generally like aren't, straight lines. A lot of them are very like playful, bendy shapes, that kind of contort around what the characters are doing in the space they're in. Objects bleed out of the panels all the time. A recurring device that it does that I really, really like is that the shape of a panel will contort around like the negative space to be like formed by an object in the foreground. Like say a peek into a clearing through some trees, the shape of the panel will have like the shape of leaves and trees, as if it's like blending a like shadowed foreground into the panel border. and every page is kind of like this fully considered tableau, and it just like you mentioned not knowing, like, if somebody didn't know quite what to think of a Yooka-Laylee comic book sight unseen, any one page of this book makes a spectacular first impression.
Yeah, the panels remind me a lot of the artwork of Alphonse Mucha, a famous Art Nouveau painter from the height of that movement. Just like I said, there's no rigid angles in this, and it's like the panels are being formed by the characters, by the world, by the items in it, and the striking use of purples and just it's funny that you brought up Nickelodeon like in this episode. I didn't really know going in that's where you were going with this, but I feel like that comparison is strikingly apt, because the way I would describe like the look of this comic in general is it oozes color. Yeah,
like oozes, I think, is the word to go with. Just I cannot believe the like vibrancy and depth of color in this book. Everything is extremely striking to look at, and there is a lot of heavy purples, a lot of very neon greens and cyans.
It also reminds me of another favorite era of mine in the artistic world, and that is late 60s psychedelia. Like, it reminds me of an album cover from 1967, and in all the best ways. And it's just, it's hyper surreal, but it plays with the natural world, and it subverts, your expectations, which makes sense, again, because that period of music and that movement, harkened back to, the late 1800s and that period of art itself. So it kind of makes sense that I'm seeing all these links back to that. But yeah, it's there's
so much consideration paid to everything too. Like the backgrounds around the panel borders in this book are never uniformly one color. They are always ever shifting depending on the mood of the scene. Like, occasionally they'll be like they'll be pure white if like the scene is outdoors in the bright blue clouds, or they might be like orange inside Ivory Towers, or purple in like a landscape filled with like purple shrubbery. It's really, really well considered.
Yeah, I was never bored or uninterested just even looking at the pages themselves. Like, not even, like, ignoring the content within. Like, just every single page was kind of a visual feast. And it definitely, like, kept me turning from page to page. Even in my reread, I kept like finding things like, ooh, that's pretty. Ooh. And before I know it, I'm at the end of the book. But, there's a lot of ways you can do a graphic novel. And I'm thinking, like, compare this to something like, and I realize it's considered a seminal work, but Watchmen, which just has this grid layout of panels. It's very, uniform and, and I don't know, workman-like,
which is appropriate for Watchmen, because it's a teardown of the way superhero comics work.
Yeah. But this, though, it's just like, it really does feel like you're kind of pulled into the world, and you forget that you're reading a graphic novel because the panels and the colors just kind of immerse you. And you are actually just completely lost in the work itself.
Right.
And so, like,
I can tell this is a sensibility that DM Kumbo, like, is bringing to Yooka-Laylee, because I see this in his other work. Like, his original graphic novel, Dreamside, similarly has a very, like, the, like, extreme bleed of colors and non-traditional panels. and it just is such a good match for Yooka-Laylee, and one I would have never considered until seeing it laid out before me.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, Yooka-Laylee has a very specific art direction. Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair has a similar art direction. And I would never think this is a perfect candidate for this kind of surreal, almost dreamscape world. But seeing it in action, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And right down to the way Kumbo portrayed the character, specifically Yuka and Laylee, I absolutely adore the way they both look in this. Specifically Laylee. This might be my favorite interpretation of Laylee. I just absolutely love the little tweaks he made to her design, which is never like done in a way that feels inauthentic to the character or to what Platonic intended, but
it straddles a very nice line where I feel the artist's personal stamp on these characters in every single panel I see them drawn, but I never feel like they are they're never mistakable as anything other than this is Platonic's Yuka and Laylee. This is who these characters are. Nothing feels off about the way they're portrayed in this book, even when they are doing these extremely incredible wild takes.
Yeah, and I love that, you know, I backed the Kickstarter campaign, a level where I got some of the various goodies, including like a pin of Yuka and Laylee in this art style, which I'm looking at right now. And I'm like, I just love like the pronounced eyelashes on Laylee, like adding this like level of personality that maybe has never been visually conveyed before. I am just completely enamored with the way they look. And I would be completely fine if Platonic in a future game maybe incorporated a little bit of the stylistic touches here.
I gotta say, like, you mentioned Yuka and Laylee specifically. Some of the other characters, like, I still think, like, fundamentally, when I love the way Yuka and Laylee are drawn in this book, but like when I close my eyes, you know, if you tell me, oh, what do Yuka and Laylee look like, I'm going to picture something like, you know, the box for Impossible Lair or something, just because like from like familiarity and exposure.
Sure.
But for some of the other characters in this book, like the ones that in particularly stand out to me, Dr. Quack and Dr. Puzz, the way DM Kumbo has drawn them in this comic, that is just that those are the default versions of those characters in my brain. You ask me to think of what does Dr. Quack look like, I'm going to think of a panel of him like cackling madly in this book.
It also helps that this is probably the most time we've spent with that character, outside of a few cutscenes in the original Yooka-Laylee. I feel like the character gets fleshed out more here in Kracklestone than anywhere else. And Dr. Puzz, to an extent, too.
Dr. Puzz, too. I mean, that's true of everybody in this book, because we never really get the chance to sit with any of these characters doing the sorts of things they do in this story. Dr. Puzz gets to be more of an active participant in a story that doesn't also have to be a game.
Right. Which we'll get into. Why don't we talk about the story, and then we'll talk about some of the characterizations. I'm trying to think the best way to sum up this story. I guess I'll just give like a few sentences to set it up. So it starts in media res with Yuka and Laylee in it's Tribal Stack Tropics, right? That's what it's supposed to be. Like they never name drop it, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Tribal Stack Tropics. But they're looking for this quill stash, a quill hoard that they didn't get in the first game because they've spent all of their quills on was it chocolate coated millworms or something, which brings to mind something I will talk about.
It's a recurring theme in this book that Yuka and Laylee are extremely frivolous with their money.
Yes, but So they get to Quill Horde. They get like a whole sack of quills. They leave the Grand Tome. They're coming back to the batship crazy, and then Trowser shows up. Trowser the snake. And he entices them with knowledge of a Grand Tome they didn't know about in the previously unmentioned and unseen basement of Ivory Towers. And within the Grand Tome, there is an invincibility granting item, MacGuffin, called the Kracklestone. This intrigues Yooka. Laylee doesn't seem to care so much. She just wants to use the quills on a foot bath. But Capital B spies this and enlists Dr. Quack to obtain the Kracklestone. So Dr. Quack, by the way, is really the villain of the story. Capital B only has kind of a minor role, makes minor appearances throughout, but Dr. Quack is kind of the primary antagonist of it.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes it work as a side story.
Yeah, and it also helps flesh out the dynamic between the two a lot more than we get to see in the game itself.
Yeah.
Because just by nature of a video game, you're not going to spend a lot of time checking in with Capital B and Dr. Quack, but you really get to see just another thing to like touch on that I really love in this book is it just kind of hammers home, I think even more than the game, just how much of an ugly, horrible boss that Capital B is to his subordinates.
Mm.
There's a lot of attention paid to him screaming at Dr. Quack, complaining, just kind of doing these like selfish little speeches to himself.
And you know, the antagonism between them was definitely illustrated in the original Yooka-Laylee. Specifically, you know, we find out like Dr. Quack is actively plotting against Capital B. But we get glimpses of their internal monologue, internal dialogue here. All the characters, I mean, Yooka-Laylee and Dr. Quack specifically, but it is nice to see that fleshed out. Specifically, like, it's not clear when this story takes place. I think it could fit quite nicely between Yooka-Laylee and Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. Ultimately, it might not matter, but I know if you're like me, you will care about that kind of stuff.
It's something I think about, but the story is so fun that it like helps put the question out of my mind, I guess.
I mean, it works. You could
like
fit it in.
You can make it work if you try hard enough. It's not like this isn't a Banjo Pilot situation where you have to twist your brain into pretzels to make this work.
Yeah, if you can accept that Capital B was working to overtake the Royal Stingdom concurrently with the events of this book, then yeah, it absolutely works as a midquel. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it did feel kind of like a sort of Donkey Kong Land like story that might not be referenced in the games themselves, like in the big sequels, but like the fans will know what happened, and that's the kind of thing that I love and miss, you know, in this era where those kind of smaller budget handheld games don't really exist. Yooka-Laylee and the Kracklestone sort of fits that role for the Yooka-Laylee franchise, which is quite all right by me. But this Grand Tome that they have to access in the basement of Ivory Towers that contains the Kracklestone, it doesn't have a name. It's not named in the actual book. I've been calling it Mount Zap Crackle, based on its most prominent natural feature, for lack of a proper term. But it's actually, the Grand Tome itself is several game worlds kind of stitched into one, which I think is just a narrative device that allows for kind of this linear video game-esque adventure. But it's across this sort of Lord of the Rings-esque fictional map. So you can have this map
One you can even get if you back to the Kickstarter.
Yeah, I'm holding the map right now too. You got this little cloth map, this little like parchment, which I love. Reminds me a little bit of a baby bib. It's very colorful and very helpful. Like I was comparing it with the map that Dr. Puzz shows in the graphic novel, and everything lines up. You even have negative space for the uncharted territory, but yeah, it's great because this is I think the map that you got at the Kickstarter tier was the only full color representation of the whole Grand Tome. Everything else was just the kind of blueprint, style that Dr. Puzz shows of the map. But, yeah, this allows for like a linear adventure without like jumping from Grand Tome to Grand Tome. So you kind of get all these environments that you would get in a Yooka-Laylee game, but without the headache of saying, now they go to this Grand Tome and now they go to that Grand Tome. It all takes place within the same Grand Tome. I call it all Mount Zap Crackle, but it might have an unspoken proper name. But the areas of it include, and I'm just going to read them all out because they all utilize the needed alliteration that Rare and Platonic have always employed. You've got Plum Petal Meadow, Fungicide Forest, haha, that's a bit of elaboration on a famed Donkey Kong 64 and dropped Banjo-Kazooie world.
And DM Combo's a self-confessed fan of DK64, so
yeah,
I'm inclined to take that as deliberate.
Bubble Bomb Bog, Bouncy Bushland, which I don't know if I made the connection while reading the graphic novel, but looking at the map, I realize Bouncy Bushland is essentially the Mushroom Kingdom, or it's a pastiche of the Mushroom Kingdom with the kind of nonsensical, circular hills that you often see. You've got Honey Tumble Hives. We'll be coming back to that one. Dream Shine Sea, which seems like something tailor-made for DM Combo sensibilities. Bulky Bone Barrens, Deep Crack Chasm, Bramble Bust Barrow. Brambles are indeed in Yooka-Laylee and the Kracklestone. And Mount Zap Crackle itself. And there is also, very intriguingly, an uncharted territory at the right of the map that is never explained. It's just on the map. It's uncharted territory.
It's literally uncharted.
Which I love, being Rare and Platonic fans. You know, the allure of the unknown of what could be there. I love that the Combo utilized that even in a graphic novel. Like,
I love not only that, but even all the locations we do know about and do see, we don't actually visit in this story. And it's like that's great. It's a world that is larger feels larger than the story needs it to be.
That's always been the style of the team behind Yooka-Laylee. There's always this overindulgence. There's this need to create more of the world than is necessary, more of that universe than is necessary. And, you know, it actually runs contrary to a lot of the ways Nintendo does things, which is kind of economic, like gameplay first philosophy. And I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but I definitely prefer one. And I prefer the one that stokes the fires of the imagination and makes you wonder, like, not only buy into the world more, but just makes you constantly wonder about it and think about it. When something sits with you after you're done with it and you keep going back to that world in your mind, in my opinion, that's when you know the creator did something right. But if it's just perfunctory, you're in, you're out, you don't really think about it again, then I think it doesn't have the staying power that it should. So I love that Combo, just picked up on the same sensibilities that I think a lot of our audience has. Clearly a fan of these games. And it shows, right down to the damn uncharted territory that I won't shut up about because I want to know what it is. I want to know what it is, and I want some sort of follow-up, and I don't know how, like, maybe you could do some sort of stop and swap with a graphic novel. I don't know how. And meanwhile, over the course of the adventure, they do run into several Yooka-Laylee series characters along the way. Now these characters somehow access the Grand Tome, either after Yooka and Laylee got there, or maybe Trowser also sold them keys. It's not quite clear, but I'm actually leaning towards the latter, because it seems like this is something that, well, when we get into the end game of the novel, the graphic novel, I think Trowser, I said Dr. Quack is the antagonist, but in many ways, Trowser is the nefarious mastermind behind it all. But several of the characters they run into include Rextro, Rextrosaurus sixtiforus, Nimbo and Nimble, Dr. Puzz, and we'll call him Royston, Kartos, and even a planker sign. And I'm not sure, I know, like, the planker signs are like a species at this point, but I don't know if they're uniformly called plankers, or plankers just one, and it's like a Professor Chops and the Oink situation. I'm not sure, or if it's just like all toads, where they're just all toads now. They're all plankers.
Yeah, it's really impressive. Like, I know that only the first Yooka-Laylee game had been out at this point, and this is such a, like, not having, like, the full scope of the Yooka-Laylee series apparent at the time. There's, like, such a, like, there's a relatively small pool of characters to draw from.
Yeah.
And they're utilized in this so well. I think, like, as you mentioned, like, having this one Grand Tome that's divided up into these very distinct areas also really facilitates that, like, Yooka and Laylee kind of run into a familiar / new face every single area they come across, and it lends credence to why those characters would be there in those spaces, and it feels really well realized.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the cheekiness that often comes with characters showing up in these worlds in the game. Like, what are you doing here? Well, and they give this very convoluted reason. And there's a little bit of that too. But it's impressive that DM Combo started writing this before the original Yooka-Laylee was even out, right? He was going off of just the like stuff Playtonic was releasing, and
if I remember correctly, like, and I mean, this holds true in the book, it's nothing beyond the first world, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true, yeah.
Like, it's the only like world native characters I believe return are Nimbo and Nimble. The rest are the principal cast that we knew about from very early on.
Yeah, the only thing that is from later in the game is Moody Maze Marsh makes a very brief cameo near the end. But besides that, yeah, everything is from the overworld, the initial batship crazy training area, Shipwreck Creek, and then Tribal Stack Tropics.
And even though I can point that out in retrospect, that is never a thought that occurred to me while reading it.
No, absolutely not.
It never feels limited by that conceit.
Not only does it never feel limited, but it also feels like such a great companion piece with Impossible Lair. For a couple of reasons. One is the big twist ending. So we find out Yooka-Laylee, spoilers, alright, Yooka-Laylee do get the Kracklestone, through a couple convoluted means, because Dr. Quack gets it, then Rextro gets it, and then they win it from Rextro at his arcade. But come to find out, the Kracklestone is a scam. The Kracklestone, it requires lithium batteries or something that can only be supplied by Trowser, for an exorbitant amount of quills. So we know Trowser sold a key to this basement of Hivory Towers to Yooka, to Dr. Quack before him, and then Yooka, and maybe Dr. Puzz and Rextro and these other characters too. But my question is, you know, this world's centered around the Kracklestone, right? Like in the world, it's even like this huge tourist attraction with these characters coming to see the Kracklestone and this big, like, kitschy kind of, sort of like tourist trap kind of fashion. So if the Kracklestone is a trouser scam, but this whole world is centered around the notion of the Kracklestone, did Trouser actually write this grand tome?
I like how you're kind of like left to draw your own conclusions as to how deep the rabbit hole of Trouser's zany scheme goes. Like, the main thing I think about is we never actually find out if the Kracklestone works. Because obviously Yooka-Laylee are never going to go on a second adventure to get those batteries in this book.
No, and the fact is,
it's very possible, like, you know, they get, like, what if they did that, got the batteries, put them in, like, does the thing actually work? Does it just, like, light up like a cheap watch? Does a slot pop out and say, oh, you also need to buy this expansion pack from Trouser?
Oh, the expansion pack would have been a good joke if it was an expansion pack instead of batteries. We don't know, and we're left to infer, but I said it worked kind of as a complement to Impossible Lair, and getting into Impossible Lair, mega spoilers here, there is this revelation, about, Impossible Lair, and another character authoring a grand tome, and it makes me it's funny if the implication is that Trouser wrote Mount Zaprackle just as a way to con people out of quills, because then we've got, you know, other characters authoring grand tomes now, and it's just going to be a thing.
It's also fun that, like, the Kracklestone in itself is a very video gamey item in such a way that I can buy that these characters wouldn't immediately assume it's just some kind of snake oil that Trouser is selling.
Right. And they do, you know, question Trouser quite a bit. He's a shifty con man. But they ultimately, Yooka, like, there's this little, like, nagging voice in Yuka's head that really makes him want to pursue it.
Yeah, I think the ultimate deciding factor is whether or not they think it's real. On the off chance it is, they don't want Dr. Quack to have it.
Yeah. Yooka in particular, I say Dr. Quack is sort of the villain of this, if we ignore that Trouser is kind of the secret omni-villain of this. But out of the two, I would say Yooka is the actual protagonist of this. Not to say that Laylee doesn't get a lot of great face time, and this is my favorite portrayal of Laylee ever thus far, but I think Yooka is the beating heart of this graphic novel.
I feel like I have so much more complete an understanding of who Yooka and Laylee are as characters because of this story.
The characterization is fantastic. And, you know, I said a lot when Impossible Lair came out about how I felt it finally moved Yooka-Laylee beyond being mere Banjo and Kazooie XPs. You know, because, you know, the original Yooka-Laylee, I love it. I think in a lot of ways it actually improves upon Banjo-Kazooie, play control, and just in the thought that goes into how the world is crafted. You know, cause as I said, like, Banjo-Kazooie, I love all the iconography of it, but let's be honest, puzzle pieces, music notes, none of it really gels together, and I like how they centered everything around these books, grand tomes, and then you've got pages, and then you've got quills, and then you've got ghostwriters. Like, they made everything uniformly connected versus like, we have these cute little whatevers named Jinjos, and I went Lovitz there.
You can tell that a lot of Banjo-Kazooie was, like, formed naturally over time based on, like, constant iteration and revision. And Yooka-Laylee's world building is, I think, very intentionally, like, we know the endpoint we want to reach. Let's make everything thematically consistent getting there to that point.
Yeah, which is great, but it also doesn't obscure the fact that Yooka-Laylee is a very conscious Banjo-Kazooie spiritual sequel, right down to the name. But, you know, as ghostwriters are just far more clever than Jinjos, they are still reskinned Jinjos, especially in the gameplay mechanics. So, Impossible Lair did a lot, I think, for the Yooka-Laylee cast to move beyond that and kind of start to carve out identities of their own. Just putting them in a different genre did wonders, because all of a sudden you weren't just thinking of Yooka-Laylee in the context of they are a lizard banjo and a bat kazooie. But this is the first time we really get into their heads, and we really see sort of more of a slice of life for both Yooka and Laylee. And this is where I think, understood these characters. Impossible Lair did a lot of legwork as far as, getting them to be beyond mere reskins of characters I already know and love. This makes them completely different individuals. And I'm kind of staggered because it is rare for me to read an expanded universe piece or to consume an expanded universe piece and be like, wow, that is the definitive portrayal of these characters. Like the Donkey Kong Country cartoon, I wouldn't have sat back and said, yep, that's my Donkey Kong. It's not going to happen. But what DM Combo has done is he has given a voice to these characters and defined them in a way that makes complete sense to me. And this is different than the Donkey Kong Country cartoon because this was made with Playtonic's full blessing and oversight. So it's a little bit different scenario. This is canon, where I don't think anybody at Nintendo or Rare was really treating the Donkey Kong Country cartoon as canon, or the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, or the Legend of Zelda cartoon, or any of the tie-in media of the time. Like the Sonic the Hedgehog comic books, did Sega ever treat those as canon?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I think, like the IDW books, now that the Sonic comics have switched publishers, like are in a bit of like could be canon if you squint kind of territory, but everything previously, absolutely not.
We're in this new era of the DKU, where a lot of these sort of expanded DKU properties, the big expanded DKU properties of the last 5 years, Yooka-Laylee and Sea of Thieves, they're getting all of these actual canon tie-ins that potentially feed back into the core games. And they're both being done with a lot of care and a lot of oversight. What strikes me is how well this does complement Impossible Lair and what we see of those characters there. But even things like
it is so hard for me to believe like Impossible Lair was a twinkle in the eye when this was being conceived of, because it just flows so well into it.
Yeah, and also things like the letters to Laylee thing on the Playtonic site, which is written by Daly, where like Laylee's characterization there is spot on with her characterization here. It all feels like it's being done by... It doesn't even feel like it's being done by the same author. It just feels like they are real people now. And I don't... Like, I know Andy Robinson, spot checked some of the continuity here, but like, honestly, I don't know how DM Combo did it, successfully pulled off their voices in the fact that they didn't really have voices before this. So, I'm kind of in awe as both, a writer myself and also a student and scholar of this shared universe and shared universes in general. This is brilliant. This is the kind of thing I would worry about the most is, are they going to screw up the characterization? Like, even more so beyond continuity, if the characters themselves don't feel right, I check out and I'm just mentally against the product. Which is why Donkey Kong Country, the cartoon, never felt right to me. I realize it has its fans and I respect that. But I just could never get into it because it wasn't Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong as I understood them, right?
And this is something like you can like get wrong even just within the same medium. Like there are things I like about Star Fox Command as an example, but I also think it makes a lot of characterization choices that rub me the wrong way.
Yeah. Cursed. Yeah. So, just broad strokes, because I really feel like you have to read this to get what we're talking about, and I like just don't let Cameron and I explain to you why this works. You really need to check it out yourself. But Yooka and Laylee, I love this. This sets them apart from Banjo-Kazooie immediately. How much more animalistic they are than Banjo and Kazooie. Because Banjo and Kazooie, yeah, Banjo likes honey. But and Kazooie can fly. But they are basically
if the collectibles in Banjo-Kazooie weren't honeycombs, Banjo could be literally any other type of animal,
or human, or he's like one of the things I love about Banjo and Kazooie and the Kongs is they're essentially humans just portrayed as animals. There's something relatable about that, but I do love when studios and creators indulge just a little bit in, well, they are apes and monkeys. Like when Dixie is grooming Donkey Kong's back in Tropical Freeze, I'm like, I like that, because there's just that little reminder that they're not quite human. They're more human than most gorillas and monkeys, but Dixie's still going to pick insects off Donkey Kong's back and eat them. and I love how Yooka and Laylee are just straight up a lizard and a bat. They eat insects. They have gross appetites. It doesn't shy away from that, but they're never not relatable because of it. It's just, it definitely plays with like the chocolate millworms, or Yooka eating or trying to eat this really disgusting fly in Bubble Bomb Bog. And then he's like spitting out fly parts as the mother worm whatever is enraged over Yooka eating her babies. It's very Grogu from Mandalorian.
Something I love about the way Yooka and Laylee are characterized in this book is, like, it was very easy to see them both as like Banjo and Kazooie archetypes when the first game came out and leading up to it, because they have a very similar dynamic with each other to Banjo and Kazooie. This book still kind of keeps that they have a very similar dynamic, but the characters themselves have a very different way of getting to, are very different in personality and kind of have a different reason that they're bouncing off each other the way they do.
Yeah.
Like I'd say, like, Banjo works as a straight man to Kazooie in the Banjo games because he comes off as like a very like naive, polite country bumpkin, like very, aw shucks, what can I do for you, Mr. Whatever? Kind of character. Yooka slots into that role as well, but he's also like for as many comments about how Banjo is like a dim-witted bear, I think he's really just kind of naive.
Yeah.
Yooka is like maybe self-destructive. I mean, self-destructively irrational, quick to act nervous, self-doubting.
The self-doubt in particular really drew me in. Self-doubt and indecision plague Yooka throughout this. And it was like, oh my god, I am seeing myself in Yooka. There's a point in the story where he and Laylee get separated. And this is the point where Yooka just completely, he like self-flatulates himself. He is just so hard on himself, and he's just like, I have completely screwed up. Like I am a nitwit. And he, like, that's me. That's my internal monologue at all times. Even when we were setting up this podcast, presumably because of all the storms, hurricane here on the East Coast, we can't live stream for our patrons. And I was just like yelling at myself throughout, like, I'm completely inept. I can't get anything right. I'm a screw up. I'm a fraud. I don't deserve any patrons. And, yeah, I'm Yuka.
Yeah, I felt a little bit of that, like, very early on in the book, where there's the shift of where they say, like, no, the responsible thing to do is brush off Trouser. It's not worth taking the risk. And then Yuka sees Dr. Quack running off with a key and just has this moment of panic. Oh, God, this is the worst mistake I've ever made and will ever make. I will throw all my money at this problem to make it go away.
Yeah.
And fix my mistake. Like, yeah. I have really screwed the pooch on this one.
I said on Twitter a while ago that Diddy was the ultimate millennial character. I might have to amend that statement by saying Yuka is in many ways, an archetypal millennial. Just so much about him, and so much about how he behaves and interacts with problems. It's just a reflection of myself and so many of my friends. I think we all see ourselves kind of in that kind of, bubble. But it also kind of illustrates why he and Laylee are a good pair, because they complement each other in ways, that they can't really fulfill just by themselves. And Laylee is impish. She is childlike and lacking in impulse control. Although, I guess Yuka is impulsive at times in this. It's kind of more measured in where they're more restrained in certain areas than others. But
they complete each other, and they both also feed each other's worst impulses.
Laylee, one of the things I loved about this was the fact that she frequently bites Yuka in sort of this playful way. Like, early on, she's just biting his head. And I'm like, you know what? If a bat and a lizard were friends, I'm sure this is what a bat would do.
Yeah, you get the impression from, like, again, I can't say enough good things about the expressions in this book, but from that series of panel, you get the impression, like, Yuka doesn't like this, but he's kind of used to Laylee acting like this.
Yeah, she's hyperactive, and in a lot of ways, a little bit more innocent and naive than Kazooie, who I would say is cynical and sardonic, and if you had a problem with Yuka and Laylee in that first game, you just played that first game, and you're like, well, Laylee is just Kazooie. She's just a purple Kazooie. Read this, because this, I think, paints the definitive portrayal of Laylee, not just, from DM Combo's perspective, but Platonic's perspective. This is who the character is, and you see that in, I think, Laylee's portrayals, going forward. I mean, everything we've seen from Laylee kind of syncs up with his portrayal. And Laylee's also a little bit gross. Like, she just lets out this massive fart at one point.
Both of them are kind of gross in this book. Speaking of Nickelodeon, there's a lot of like regurgitating food and farting, and it's all made funnier because it's like juxtaposed by the artwork showing it being so beautiful.
Yes. The most gorgeous fart clouds you've ever seen, ever in any graphic novel.
I'm thinking, like, earlier I was running through like how best to describe the artwork to the audience and like how much I appreciate it, and I just hit my eyes on this panel where the like large corplet they've defeated farts, and like the grass skirt they've made for themselves, the leaves on it part to let the gas cloud escape.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the big fart cloud was like, oh, because it was like triggering the muscle memory in my brain, and I couldn't remember like why some of this felt so comforting and familiar, and then I remembered like this feels like early 90s Nickelodeon, and then I like in the big like comical signs near the beginning when they're in the temple and they've got like big signs that say push this button. It did remind me a lot of the comic art direction of Rocko's Modern Life, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, I get a lot of Rocko energy from Yooka in this book.
Oh yeah, and I love the character of Rocko. He was relatable to me before I even realized he was relatable to me, and yeah, Yooka definitely gives off massive Rocko energy in this. But, you also get a sense of why they're friends beyond just kind of making up for the qualities they individually lack. Both also get each other going. And you actually like understand like how they click when they start incessantly riffing on each other with like their dad joke puns.
There's a very good sequence of them just trying to like out-groaner pun each other.
Yeah, I mean, it happens like a couple times. Like they get off the train, and then like a few pages later, they just get back on it again. And there's this great panel where they're like doing the dad puns, and then they even just like annoy this eavesdropping fairy.
Yeah, it's another thing, like, I get why these contrasting personalities are friends.
Yes, yeah. About 30% of the way into the book, I was like, okay, I understand Yooka-Laylee in a way that I think will just enrich the games themselves going forward. Like, when I go back into the original Yooka-Laylee now, I'm gonna be with these personalities. I get them in a way I didn't get them before. And that is probably the greatest contribution this graphic novel gives to the wider Platonic franchise beyond just being an excellent piece of work itself. But it is canon. It does play in that continuity. And I wanted to discuss a little bit of the continuity contributions of Yooka-Laylee and Kracklestone, because there are a few things it does to kind of broaden our understanding of the corner of the world that Yooka and Laylee inhabit. Shipwreck Creek and High Ivory Towers. So this establishes a bit more of the area around Shipwreck Creek, at least by referencing and name-checking some locations rather than actually showing. But one thing that excited me, Cameron, I don't know if you caught this, when Yooka is setting out with the quills early that morning to go buy rocket boots, because they get these quills from this hidden treasure trove in presumably Tribal Stack Tropics. And I love that quills seem to be the universal currency in this corner of the world. Cause yeah, you use them, with Trouser in the games, but it was never clear, like, is this, an accepted form of currency? And it seems to be a universal form of currency, but, we know that the exit, like the way out of Shipwreck Creek is in the original Yooka-Laylee around those, red pipes near the cliff. We see Yooka venturing out towards, like, going through there. And he gets held up going out, but, like, it seems to me like you could, if you just find the right tunnel or something, you would go out and get to explore the surrounding countryside and maybe a town. It's very exciting, the possibility. But I was like, so there is something beyond there. It's not just, Yooka and Laylee in these mountains with this factory right next to them. There is more to this, landscape, which I absolutely adore. You'll need to update your map, Cameron.
Yeah.
So we know that Yooka and Laylee shop at B-Mart BEE-Mart, which of course seems to be a play on Kmart, or, you know, the superstore archetype, your Walmarts, your Targets, which I guess B-Mart would imply that it's owned or partially owned or founded by capital B.
Yeah, no ethical consumption under capital B.
Well, yes. So at B-Mart, Laylee wants to buy a B-Mart brand deluxe moisturizing foot bath, which I respect that as somebody who has a weird fascination with pampering himself and like working out my sore, tired muscles. I respect the foot bath. But the foot bath, like that is like Laylee's rosebud throughout this. Like, she keeps coming back to the foot bath. She wants the foot bath. And I have to admit, like, I wanted her to have the foot bath, Cameron. Like when Yuka spent the Quill's trouser after Dr. Quack got the key to the basement to go to the Grand Tome to get the Kracklestone, and then Yuka had to spend all of the Quill's trouser to get the second key. I was like, Laylee's foot bath. She's gonna be so upset. I was invested in this foot bath, and spoilers, I was happy she got one at the end. We also get a little bit more backstory on how they moved into the Batship Crazy, or rather why they moved into the Batship Crazy. Honeybee Bank rejected their home loan request, and so they just moved into this derelict shipwreck in the mountains. And those two things, B-Mart and Honeybee Bank rejecting a home loan request, maybe the most American references in the book, and therefore the most American references in the entirety of the Yooka-Laylee franchise. DM Kumbo does a great job at keeping the Britishisms, UK, spelling of words. Everything is intact and consistent throughout. Like, I don't think I spotted one, American, spelling of a word that has a British variant or UK variant. I could be wrong. I could have overlooked something, but I did catch a lot of the UK spellings, a lot of extra U's in there. Which is good because that's what's used in Yooka-Laylee. The characters do have this, English sensibility about them. But yeah, these are the most bits of Americana that have slipped into Yooka-Laylee. But I would argue it's completely justified given capital B and the American reality of constantly living in a corporate owned state. Because we may not like Jeff Bezos here in the US, but sometimes Amazon Bezos, I know, I said it, I meant it. But sometimes Amazon is the only option. And if you live in a small rural community, sometimes Walmart is all you got, or else you live in a food desert. So sometimes we have to swallow our principles and make do. And Yooka-Laylee, I mean, they are enemies with capital B, but they still shop at his superstore because where else are they going to shop? Laylee's got to get her foot bath. So, I do appreciate that kind of nuanced bit of morality, right? Like, Yooka-Laylee, they can't be proud here. They've got to just go to B-Mart and shop there because where else are they going to go? Capital B sort of has a monopoly, a stranglehold on this area.
Right.
So.
And you get the impression they're not really thinking about that for any of this.
No.
Hey, capital B is just the guy who's a thorn in their side sometimes.
But I mean, can you imagine if like your arch nemesis was Sam Walton?
You got in a fist fight with him once, and you live right next door to him as well.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, I'm gonna be side-eyeing those Walmart greeters. Like, what are you up to, old man? Don't put that sticker on me. What, is it laced with poison? Get away from me. So, Yooka-Laylee, it does kind of flesh out a bit of the continuity. But, what I wasn't expecting, Cameron, were DKU connections. Honest to log DKU connections that go beyond just platonic. Now, obviously, this is stuff just like what Playtonic does, that can only be alluded to. But it wasn't that subtle in some places.
It's it's a nudge, you know.
Well,
kind of.
I'll point it out when I get to it, but there was one thing in particular that I think I actually fell out of my seat when I saw it. I was like, oh my God, he did it. He put it in there. So yeah, and just for the record, like, I would have been perfectly fine if it was just Yooka-Laylee characters, right? Cause, I mean, we consider them DKU,
No.
you know, they're grandfathered in, and, like, I didn't need anything else in here. It's not like, you know, when we were pestering Playtonic to put a goldfish in the game, which mission accomplished, by the way.
Yeah, we learned from our interview with DM Combo that he had to keep trying to remember to put the goldfish in Dr. Puzz's tank in the drawings of her in this.
Yeah. But you know,
that's really enough.
Yeah. But and now Yooka-Laylee
we made someone's
enough.
life harder.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting actual nods to the greater DKU. So a not so subtle undercurrent seems to be, and this is just my impression, that in addition to Yooka and Laylee and Dr. Quack and potentially and Dr. Puzz and Rextro and Nimbo and Nimble and Kartos getting roped into this adventure, Trouser may have also sold a key to the Hyrie Tower's basement to a character that's not named, but is definitely alluded to. Banjo and quite possibly Kazooie with him, maybe having an adventure off panel at the same time in this Grand Tome.
You really get the impression that they're like you have just missed Banjo and Kazooie.
Right. So there are 3 references that would indicate he's on, he and Mimi Kazooie are on their own adventure, trying to get the Kracklestone with their own trappings, the things that would entail a Banjo-Kazooie adventure. Because, okay, when they encounter the Planker sign, by the way, the Planker sign, in another great bit of continuity, which I don't know how DM Combo made work, or if these were Andy Robinson's suggestions, or if they were incorporated after the game came out. I imagine there's a lot of back and forth rewriting the dialogue that went into this, which we'll have to ask DM Combo at some point. But the Planker sign, just like all the Planker signs in Yooka-Laylee, misunderstands what Yooka and Laylee's role is. In this case, thinking they're the landscapers, which is, I just love that running gag continues into this. But the Planker sign says, when describing the area Honey Tumble Hives, and I quote, "Saw a honey bear over there. He kept pocketing random junk he found on the ground. Totally deranged." Sounds like a Trump tweet. Totally deranged. Yooka replies, "Poor guy." So, honey bear. I mean, it's obviously an explicit reference. I said it's subtle, but that's kind of like, I mean, anybody who knows what the historical lineage of
it's just a matter of you wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't a nod.
Right. Notably, Honey Tumble Hives is one of the few areas of the Grand Tome that Yooka and Laylee never enter or explore. They see it from a distance, and that's it. So I love that potentially Banjo and Kazooie are here at the same time, also trying to get the Kracklestone. Like, Trouser cast a wide net, with this scam, right? Which makes me I like the character of Trouser before, because Trouser is one of the few, quote unquote, XPs in Banjo and Kazooie that in Yooka-Laylee that was totally removed from Banjo-Kazooie, because he basically Bottles the mole, right? But he's so unlike Bottles in every single way.
Like, it's kind of the opposite dynamic from Bottles in that, like, Trouser holds all the power here. Like, not just in terms of, like, gameplay gating, but just, like, the whole conceit with Bottles is that he was kind of an an easy target for all of Kazooie's insults. Trowser, and I like how this story kind of, as you said, because like Banjo and all these other characters are kind of implicitly roped into this scheme of his, like he's just kind of the omni snake oil salesman, for literal snake oil salesman, for every three platforming character, because he just knows the market to scam.
Right. And so it's implied by the planker sign that Banjo is picking up stuff. Your mind goes to Jiggies, right? And so like did Trowser like also put Jiggies into this Grand Tome to like ensnare Banjo and to make it like this side of the Grand Tome will be a Banjo-Kazooie adventure? Well, the answer is yes, because eventually at one point in the story, after Yooka and Laylee are separated, Yooka encounters the cloud characters Nimbo and Nimble, and Yooka needs to get, without getting too much into the minutia of the story, Yooka needs to get a molecule to Dr. Puzz so Dr. Puzz can power her invention to get Yooka to mount Zap Crackle without Laylee, because Laylee's been captured at this point. So Yuka's like, hey, have you seen a molecule? And Nimbo's like, yeah, I think I've saw one. And then he vomits up a whole horde of items that includes the molecule, but there are other items in the sick. This is the point where I fell out of my chair. I was on the couch reading this, and my butt leapt off the cushion and I hit the floor. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I've got to tell somebody. No, I can't spoil this. So these are 3 items that have great significance. And, the first one is a Jiggy. Unmistakably a Jiggy. It is, clear as day, the shape is right. It's a Jiggy. And so it's like, yeah, there are Jiggies in this Grand Tome, and Nimbo ate one.
That happens to Jiggies an awful lot.
There's also a pair of blue underpants, which are similar to the ones, Yooka and Laylee have. So I think that's just more of a reference to the Batship Crazy and the underpants. But you could also infer, as we did with those underpants in Yooka-Laylee, that they are Mr. Pants brand underwear pants. Cause they're Y fronts. I mean, they're not red, but we've seen, in Yooka-Laylee that they have the pants catalog that has a whole variety of colors. And in It's Mr. Pants, there are a wide variety of pants colors as well. So I'm gonna say that's a Mr. Pants reference, even if that was not the intention.
I think it's, especially considering the pairing of items that it's with, if you want to read that into it, it's not too big a leap.
Well, it's the third one.
Speaking of the third item, this is the one that that took me the most by surprise.
Yeah, weirdly, you would think the Jiggy would be the bigger deal for me. No, because it's this one that just pushed it over the line into, are you kidding me? Do you want to say what it is, Cameron?
Anti-gravity chocolate from Conker.
Okay, yeah. It's not just a piece of chocolate. It is floating chocolate.
It's one of those things like similar to TT showing up in the Alpha Builder Sea of Thieves, where it's more striking because it's not the reference you expect. Like when I hear that, this book has DKU nods in it, I think, well, the go-to is Banjo-Kazooie, obviously, because that's the pedigree.
Yeah.
I did not expect a nod to Conker in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, the easier one would be to have, like, a banana in there, right? Because it's like, Donkey Kong, but, bananas, whatever. Anti-gravity chocolate is such an esoteric, niche, specific reference that you wouldn't expect to see it in something like this. Not that I expected to see a Jiggy, but so that might also imply, and Conker is never referenced anywhere else in this. There's nothing about like, oh, saw a squirrel running around. He looked pretty fucking miserable. But it implies to me that Trouser baited this for Conker as well, right? If there's anti-gravity chocolate in here, he at very least tried to sell this key to Conker, who probably couldn't be asked,
Yeah, I think Conker would wonder if there is money in it for him, rather than being inclined to let go of his money.
I don't know if you could out-con Conker. Con is in his name, right? So, but that is just like, I know DM Combo is a fan, right? I know he's listened to the conversation. He said as much, in our interview with him, like, he's listened to the conversation even when drawing. So it's not surprising, or at least it shouldn't be surprising that these references made it in. But it's surprising all the same, and it's appreciated too, because, a Jiggy, you can't copyright a puzzle piece. You can't copyright a piece of chocolate. So the references that you can play with, you can't just say, that is a Jiggy from off of Banjo-Kazooie.
They're very safe references to make, but also they're so overtly specific that there is no room for interpretation. Like, if you put a floating, square of chocolate in your comic book, there's not really any other conclusions for me to draw. Especially
when it's next to a golden puzzle piece and a pair of Y-front underwear. Yeah. And again, that's this kind of thing that I didn't need. I wasn't looking for, but the fact that they're in there, I'm never going to shut up about it. This is the kind of thing that makes me proud to be a comic book guy, right? Makes me want to wear my nerdiness on my sleeve, my geeky interest, because I feel like I am being appreciated here. I feel like people like me are being appreciated reading this. I don't feel like I'm being punched down at for liking this stuff. I feel like my interests are being celebrated because they are the author's interests. And I think, for as fraught as these times we live in are, that is one area that is dramatically better than it used to be. The way the entertainment industry works now, there is something for everybody, and nothing is being gatekept by, elite Harvard writers who work on the Simpsons staff, it is something that I was beaming about for several pages afterwards, and I'm beaming about right now. So it's just one panel, actually two panels, because you kind of see the Jiggy and then you get a closer look and then you see the other stuff in there. But, and ultimately it doesn't really matter to the story and the characterization and the art. They're what matters here. But just this one little panel made me feel like, yeah, he gets me.
A panel of, let me reiterate, vomit.
But again, the fact that it is all just coated in Nimbo Sick makes it all the more special to me. Then Dr. Puzz shows up near the end of the story. She shows back up near the end of the story. She's got a weapon called the Puzzler, and you're like, oh, okay. That because she's Dr. Puzz. But it's also, it's a twofer. Because it's the Puzzler, but it fires ammunition that are clearly just broken up Jiggy pieces. So she's presumably gathered some of the Jiggies, that she found in this grand tome, and now she's using it as bullets in her makeshift gun.
Just another comment on the expressions on like gleefully mischievous Dr. Puzz in the frames where she's using that gun. Like, DM Combo did such a really spectacular job of making Dr. Puzz so much fun in this book.
Not just Dr. Puzz in that panel. Dr. Puzz's unnamed goldfish that DM Combo had to remember to draw. Wink, wink. I I'm just going to call him Royston for the purposes of us and our audience. Royston is
a common name.
Look, I know several Roystons, at least two. Royston is delightfully expressive in this. Cause he's usually in most panels, he's cowering behind Dr. Puzz's head. Like he's got a very meek kind of like, which would make sense if it was Royston, because like, please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. Actually, oh my God, Cameron, if Royston knows Banjo is in this Grand Tome, of course he would be hiding behind Dr.
He tried to
Puzz's
eat me last time.
Oh my God, you can't let him take me back for the 5th time. I can't go back to that. Like, I'm happy with you, Dr. Puzz. So yeah, Royston's usually like hiding, but, at the panel where Dr. Puzz is firing the puzzler, Royston has this like, expression where you actually see him getting fired up in the thick of the action too. Like he's like, yeah, come on, let's get him. Which I appreciated, because I was looking at Royston in every single panel he appeared in. And that was the panel where he really like stopped being meek and he was like, all right, let's do this. I'm a man of action.
Yeah. There's also like, just to go back to like story and characters, like the dynamic between Dr. Puzz and Dr. Quack, where like one was sort of betrayed by the other, is it's mostly confined to like backstory in the original Yooka-Laylee. You see it more play out a little bit here with like the invention she wanted the molecule for was for the Puzzcopter. And when Yooka-Laylee point out, oh, Dr. Quack has something like that called the Quackcopter, she kind of goes ballistic because he's ripped her off yet again.
And then when Dr. Quack is like running diagnostics on his failing Quackcopter, it even reads out as Puzzcopter, like he's even stolen the basic software behind it.
Yeah, he's incredibly insecure about his inventions being definitely original, do not steal.
Yeah.
I guess I also wanted to touch on, I know we're kind of going way out of order again, but just because I'm thinking about this arc of like when she gets the puzzler, Kartos is also in this story.
Yeah.
And I enjoy him so much more as a character than I did in the original Yooka-Laylee.
I enjoy him portrayed here. I enjoy him so much more as a character when I don't have to play his segments.
There's that angle to it, and I think for some people that's also the case with Rextro. Like I've always been like of the opinion that like Rextro as a character is so lovable that even when like his gameplay segments were awkward to play in the original Yooka-Laylee, it's not enough to make me dislike the character himself, because he is so like genuine and sincere and like wonderfully oblivious to the world around him.
Yeah.
Kartos had the problem for me in the first game of, we've touched on before, he was kind of like things were like complaining that minecart levels had disappeared from games after like 2 Donkey Kong countries had just come out.
After Minecraft?
Yeah. And it kind of colored his characterization for me like, oh, this guy is just, it made him kind of come off like whiny to me in a way that's not as fun as when Cranky Kong is whiny, because I'm just saying, well, no, your thing is still going on. This book kind of takes a swerve with Kartos's character in a way that I think is a lot more endearing, in that he's framed as more of a doddering old man, like a Grandpa Simpson type.
It's characterization that works with his portrayal in Yooka-Laylee, even if it does take a detour from it. But I think this should be the definitive roadmap for how to handle Kartos going forward, whenever he appears in future games, because it's like, yeah, this, like, he's kind of cracked this complicated shell of this character. Like, how can you make this character work when he didn't really work for a lot of fans in the first game? I think he's nailed it. And I do wonder, like, too, like, cause Kartos was one of the early characters revealed. The Dr. Puzz, Dr. Quack rivalry was one of the first story elements that was really shown off, in spring of 2016. And, so clearly it's DM Kumbo was utilizing a lot of that early material for this when he was breaking down the Kracklestone graphic novel. And, but he did it in a way that, like, it doesn't feel like this is just early beta Yooka-Laylee material. Like, it's like, well, that relationship between Quack and Puzz wasn't really fleshed out in the first game. It was all conjectural backstory. Here we actually get to see it in action, and it feels like, finally we see it. Kartos, his character, it was just kind of a confused mess in the original Yooka-Laylee. But you just tweak it a little bit and, he's a fun character now. And that's what this does so well. Like, I said, like, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair made me a bigger fan of the entire Platonic, corner of the world. Yooka-Laylee and the Kracklestone really just makes me almost fanatical about these characters. It did when I read it, but rereading it now, I just realized how much I actually loved it. And, how much it makes the characters all feel just so endearing to me. What are your final thoughts, Cameron, on Yooka-Laylee and the Kracklestone? I'll give you your platform first before I give mine.
I genuinely don't know what else to say other than, if you have not read this, I wholeheartedly recommend it. This book is a work of art in every sense of the word. The story is a whole lot of fun. It is gorgeous doing it. And I think it might be one of the, like, most gorgeous books I've ever seen, and I don't necessarily mean that in terms of the interior art or the cover. I mean the entire package.
Yeah.
I would say, like this is going a little bit off the beaten path of the point, but the physical version of this book is so incredibly well considered, as like a beautiful, cohesive piece. It fleshes out the characters of the Yooka-Laylee world in a big way that, like, feels key to defining who they are for me for everything going forward. It's a fantastic lens to view these characters and world for that's very different from the games, but never feels out of step. DM Kumbo was absolutely the right person to have been given the authority over these characters for this. His sensibilities blend so well with those of Platonic. It seems like the tritest thing to say, like, this perfectly captures the experience of playing a Yooka-Laylee game in a comic, but really it kind of captures an experience that you can't get in a Yooka-Laylee game by nature of what the medium is, and it is such a worthwhile look at these characters in this world.
Yeah, it was exactly what it needed to be. And as someone who is already a fan of Yooka-Laylee and Platonic, and obviously a hyper fan of the DKU, finally my shared universe, finally my Urkelverse, it felt wonderful to have something this high quality made for us. And like you said, not just the quality of the content, of the artwork, of the story, which is all superlative, right? But the graphic novel itself, the physical edition is beautiful. I've currently got the backer edition, but I have ordered the Grand Tome edition too. Because in my entire, comic book, graphic novel, reading experience. In the course of that, as a kind of secondary side hobby, I've never held anything like this. I mean, the pages are heavyweight, sturdy pages, luxurious binding. It was like a spa day for my eyes and fingers. It was like Laylee's foot bath, but for my senses. You know, and you know, granted, this is what Kickstarter affords you, but I am just beyond tickled that we have something this bespoke for us. Because I've had $150 editions, like the absolute editions of some famous like DC Comics stories. You know, very, very expensive, large books, but they're printed on what's essentially one rung above newsprint. Just ultimately very expensive, but very cheap. And this Yooka-Laylee graphic novel is packaged like a sacred text, like you'd see in the Library of Alexandria. It is something so beyond what I'm used to, especially for my deepest passion, which is the DKU. Having something like this for us, it's unfathomable, you know? And so I definitely recommend checking out the Grand Tome edition. Get a copy while you still can. But what I didn't realize this until I was deep into my reread of this for this episode, was how it effortlessly did pull together all of those divergent threads of my childhood. It took me back to my days of Nickelodeon. It validated and celebrated my hyper-focus on continuity, characterization, and other geeky things. And it did so written by someone who clearly loves the DKU and this era of gaming as much as we do. Which is all well and good, but, you know, we still have some questions. There are things we have unanswered, and I think we need to take them back to the man himself. So on the next episode of the Kongversation, this time the DM will be sliding into us.
This has been a File 2 production.
Qué rico.